Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. During a train trip to New Delhi, a pair of commandos face an army of invading bandits. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction for Kill. Well, Luke, we are back with not another horror film. It has been a little bit. We've been very good about staying in the horror subgenre recently. But no, we got ourselves another one that kind of falls into that Sisu Monkey Man kind of territory, where it's a bit of an action flick, but you know, we are Splattercast, and there's a lot of splatter in these kinds of films. And that's why we like covering them. Also, I mean, we're big action fans, so, you know, you don't really have to twist our arm too hard if there's an intriguing concept or some good buzz around some of these films. Because ever since John Wick, and I say The Raid a few years before it, it seems like at least we get 2 or 3 of these a year. And Kill is the next one. And this one does set itself apart a little bit here because obviously this one is taking place, it hails from India. So it's one of those things where it was shot, produced, everything over in India, and all the actors are Indian. And yes, this is like a whole production for them. So this did have my interest, admittedly, after looking into it and hearing some of the positive buzz. Luke, how did you feel about Kill going into it?
I'm usually intrigued by these films. Now, you never really know what to expect here. But, you know, us being big fans of The Raid, and I love The Night Comes for Us, things like that, that really offer that splatterfest, so to speak. You know, you kind of get excited to see how is this going to differentiate itself from the pack? Is it going to do something different? Is it going to come through an intriguing aspect? And of course, we're all here for the kills, the crazy kills. So I was excited to see what it was going to do. Being in 2024, so much has been done in this genre over the last 10 years of what are they going to offer us. So anytime this gets dropped in our lap here, it already piques my interest just because I want to see how these creatives are going to achieve something different than what we have seen over the past 10 years.
Agreed. And, you know, I just want to come out and say right off the bat that I think had this film not come out the exact same year as Monkey Man, this might have impressed me a little bit more. And I only say that just because of, you know, obviously they both take place in India. You know, they are predominantly Indian-led cast. And, you know, it's one of those things where they are not too similar in concept as far as like the setup and what's going on necessarily, but when it comes down to the brass tacks, yes, we are watching a guy beat the living shit out of other guys in gory fashion. And not to say that that's not entertaining in this. I think that Kill does offer quite a few cool kills into it, but I think for Monkey Man being such a surprise with being so layered and having such a well-developed character and kind of going into some deeper subtext, this one felt very by the numbers for most of the film, and it wasn't until a particular part that I really found myself getting engaged. But even by then, it was still a little bit of a wane for me, where it was like some moments I was really into it. Some moments I was like, okay, we're kind of padding the runtime here.
Yeah, I got to be honest as well. Watching the film, it had my interest, but I never felt completely engaged in the actual film itself. When you come from a narrative perspective, and, you know, I don't want to throw these films by the wayside when we talk about this action-y kind of splatterfest, these types of films here, because, you know, sometimes narratively, they have an intriguing story intertwined with what they're showing us on screen in terms of, you know, the action and everything. But, you know, this one I will say was pretty light on the narrative. It was by the numbers. Really, it didn't really offer too much of a difference of anything that we have seen. It just kind of was like, you know, A, B, and C, and then we're going to throw in a gore fest. So, you know, for me, from a narrative perspective, I didn't really see too much from the story. I think there's some intriguing beats in here, especially from both sides of the opposing force and our protagonist, because we kind of get to see the people through each different lens and what they're going through. So I think it did offer it an aspect of some emotion, but I don't think it really turned up the volume on those emotional levels. So from a narrative perspective, I think it was rather light. This film offers almost two different things for me. And we had talked about it prior to recording, where at the beginning, I felt like it was a little more realistic, whereas then a little bit later on in the film, they really turn up the volume in terms of, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's almost like you flip a switch and it's like something happens and that flip gets switched and it's like, okay, now we're dealing with this Superman almost character. And I was like, okay, now it's starting to feel really like how we've seen in the past of a lot of these kind of protagonists just fighting people and kicking the shit at everybody.
I get where you're coming from with that. I do. And I think it's weird. I'm coming from it from a completely different angle, because like I was pretty thrown off by just how honestly cheesy like a lot of the opening was, and a lot of how they set everything up.
Oh,
It was very soap opera-y, and like I was like, oh man, like this is getting rough. And it's not until our bad guys get introduced that it's like, okay, we actually have somebody, an antagonist here, who's got a little bit of charisma. I thought he was one of the best parts of the film. I do want to put that out there. The antagonist was absolutely just so much fun to watch at a certain point. He's one of those villains that, for what it is, you love to hate him. I think his name is Fanny, I think, in the film. But yeah, he was he offered a lot of really great like, again, love to hate him kind of moments. For me, I think the film actually improved once that switch flips, because like it gets to the point where it's like I felt like for most of this film leading up to that, and I do gotta say it takes a good 45 minutes for something to happen, and once that happens, I think the movie finally engages for me, which is far too long. But I also, on one hand, feel that it's kind of necessary, but I think they easily could have shortened that down. I think that was way overdone. But I think that overall, once the switch flips and you actually start getting into the meat and potatoes of the actual, like, what's going on, once that kind of Superman moment happens, I think everything ups. And that is, as far as the action doesn't feel as paint by numbers. It feels more consequential. Because like before, I agree with you that it is cool to see our main character, having a hard time. Like, he's getting his ass kicked at some points. But like, he still had that throughout the film. But I liked that when they actually did collide, it felt like the first half of the film, they're pulling their punches a bit. Because they even mention, like, oh, like, you shouldn't have killed that guy. That's a very minor spoiler, I guess. But it's one of those things for me where it's like, once they finally do switch to it, I think everything goes up to 11 after that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I was unhappy with the back end of the film, or, over an hour's worth of film still left. I think the front half, and I'm not speaking of that beginning, because that was very soap opera-esque. Another thing of this film, if I can just go on a side mission here, is some of the music that they do is very kind of like
it's so jarring.
It's like so over exaggerated to tell us what emotion we're supposed to be feeling at that moment. It's like, I think we got it, but you're gonna play like soap opera-esque music, or it's this thing that doesn't really fit, that is just over exaggerated, and it really annoyed me. But I'm more so talking about when we start kind of getting into the stakes of things, and we're seeing our protagonist go through the ringer of sorts. And I was like, okay, well, at least we're not Superman. And then when we hit that trigger because something happens, I'm like, were we just holding back this whole time? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
And it was like, okay, and then we do turn the volume up. But for me, that first half was a little bit different than what we get in a lot of other films of where we have Superman taking on people. So I was like, okay, I can't compare that. But when we get into those beats of things, okay, this feels like familiar territory of what we've seen. for me, it never quite gets there as to what we've seen in the past. So for me, if I'm comparing this to other films that we've seen, it just doesn't match up. Yes, there's some intriguing things here. There's something that happens imagery-wise. I thought was rather intriguing with our bad guys almost walking under bodies a little bit. And I thought that was like, okay, that's pretty wild imagery. And I was like, this is rather interesting. So there are some interesting ideas in here, but when we come to the violence that we've seen in the past, when we're putting this up against The Night Comes for Us or The Raid, it just doesn't quite match up for me. So, that's where, while I found that back half intriguing, I can compare it to so many other films I've seen, and it just did not hit as much as I've seen in those past films.
I completely agree with that scene you're referencing. I was going to point that out myself, as I thought that concept and just the way that scene was executed was honestly one of my favorite parts, because it's like, wow, they're he's really putting it in their face, because it is one of those things where I think for me the film felt so by numbers, so generic, and I don't even want to say generic, but it did just feel like a derivative of The Raid or Monkey Man or John Wick or something for so long, that once that switch finally hits, it almost felt like, okay, now the cards are off the table for me. I don't have to worry about this being so grounded anymore. I am ready to just see this guy. It's the simplest setup you could have. They take forever to get there, but it's simple as hell, really, at the end of the day. And it's like, just let him go. Just let him off the chain. And there's a few scenes where he absolutely is, and I fucking love it. I think there's a couple of really standout kills here. There is one, all I'll say is that it involves a hunting knife going into somebody's mouth. And it's just the way that they execute that. There's one involving a fire extinguisher, two involving a fire extinguisher. I got to say, they're really, holy shit. There are some good kills. Again, are they anything that I can sit here and say, will they stand out amongst anything? Are they the pencil scene from John Wick 2 or anything? No, not really. But I think that if you like these kind of movies, it's definitely interesting. It's definitely something that will satisfy that itch for you if you can make it through it. I really think that if this movie lost 20 minutes and we tighten this thing up, I think that we could have had a really solid flick here. I just felt like they spent a lot of time setting things up, which, again, on some hands it's necessary, but I just think that there are many moments that we could have cut out that just get us a nice tight 90 minutes, and we would have been, boom, right there, all action, all gas, no breaks. It would have been great.
Yeah, and we always talk about runtimes. It's no secret. And I don't necessarily cringe when we're looking at an hour 45, but when you're presenting something so light on narrative here, I think there's no reason for this to be an hour 45 unless we're just going to have a kill reel, which we got of sorts, but it wasn't anything out of the ordinary that we do see. Yes, there's some intriguing stuff here, but it's not going to be on best of lists at the end of the year when we talk about kills or anything like that. I think they found a rhythm toward, what people would want out of this film in the back half, but it didn't really stand out amongst a lot of the other films that we see. So, I think people who go in for kills and kill here, I think, you'll find some good stuff, and I think you might have a fun time in a certain aspect, but I don't think it's going to be something you're going to be talking about by the end of the year, or when we're having a movie marathon and you're putting this up against the best ofs, The Raid, The Night Comes for Us, John Wick, anything like that, Sisu even. I don't think this would make, that movie marathon, so to speak. So, for me, I'm not unhappy that I watched this. I think, there was some fun stuff in here. Do I think I'd go back and rewatch this? No, I think I've had my fill with Kill. For me, I think I'm going to give this worth a watch because, it had some decent stuff in it. It had some intriguing kills. And of course, the one scene that we actually mentioned in here with some imagery, I think was rather intriguing. So for me, worth a watch.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of really fun little things they did. There's stuff involving all I'll say is a little bit of splatter involving a train door and one of the characters on their vest, just to kind of point it out to Luke so maybe he knows what I'm talking about, that I thought was cute and fun. I think that there's a lot of really great creative elements that they use. it's just it turns into this up and down roller coaster of like, I really like some of this, and then some of it I'm just like, okay, let's get a move on. And unfortunately, a lot of that happens with the action in the first half, because I hate nothing more than to feel like we're just extending fight scenes with no impact. And you know, it's like, that's the beauty of the Raid 2, in my opinion, where that is like a mob film and it's super long, it's 2.5 hours, but everything has consequences and stakes, and Kill just doesn't have that. Kill is very much a mixed bag all in all. But yeah, I mean, I sat through it and I got through the film. It's not something that was like that hard to watch. It just, again, you really feel those rises and falls. And yeah, I got to sit there and give it a very solid worth a watch. It's right in the middle of that for me, where it's like, it's not a bad time. It was not something that I'm going to ride home about, but it's also, there's nothing about it that makes me sit here and say, oh, this is garbage, don't watch this. I think that if you're into this stuff, check it out. If you are not into this at all, if you don't like action, and you especially don't like kind of, I guess, soap opera-y kind of stories, yeah, you're going to have a lot of turn-off moments in this. So very mixed, extremely big mixed bag on this one. But yeah, that is Kill. This thing is going to be hitting select theaters on July 4th. I was actually super surprised to see a few of our theaters in the area are playing it. So yeah, it's going to be having a pretty wide release. So if you are interested, you want to see some cool kills, and you don't mind a little bit of an extended runtime, this one might be for you. So let us know down below if you got a chance to check it out. And yeah, that's going to wrap us up here.
American remake, so we'll see what happens.
Are we really?
Yeah, it's already been announced. Chad Stahelski is producing, so.
God, no, I don't want that. Why? Oh my God, I got to close this video. That would have been a whole nother talking point. Like, oh no. Oh my God. See,
we'll see.
It's not even that great of a movie, but it's like, why? Oh, fuck, man. Okay. And that's going to wrap it up here for us, folks. We got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. I've released a couple of top 5 videos you should check out if you want to know what other films are coming out this month. I talked about some of those. I also talked about some films that you should watch before or after you see Maxine. And Luke and I just got a chance to check out the Hatchet Complete Collection, thanks to the folks over at Dark Skies. Really love that set. And yeah, that's going to do it for us. So until next time, folks, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horse shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.